In this video, I'll be showing you the independent t-test, and we'll also start out by making a bar graph in order to visualize our data. And so again, we have our data window, our output window, and in this case, we know that for our independent t-test, we want to use our independent variable, a categorical independent variable with two levels. So we want to be comparing two groups here essentially. And then we also want to have a scaled, as SPSS puts it, dependent variable. And so here we're going to be looking at point of view because we can see that there are two levels here, 2 or 3, and timing will be our dependent variable. And so one of the things that I do want to show you here before we even get into our test is just something that'll make things a little bit easier for us. And that's to add some values here. So if I go under variable view, and we have data view and variable view. And variable view is where I can add additional information about my variable. So I like to make sure that my scales of measurement are correct, particularly when I'm importing a file or adding a new variable. We make sure that it's numeric if it's numeric, as opposed to being text, for instance. We might select string if we have text instead. Here we have all numbers. And particularly under values, if I go to point of view and I click the 3 dots here, it's going to ask me for what value. So I'm going to have 2s and 3s here. And for 2s, because this is point of view, in this data, this was some language data. I can say this is second person. And for value 3, I can say this is third person and clicking add. Once I say OK here, that's going to actually define this. So now SPSS is going to remember that 2 means second person, 3 means third person. It's actually going to use these labels when we're doing things, which make it a little bit easier because we don't have to remember the codes. We can actually see in words what that variable or what that level of that variable is indicating. So let's start out by making our bar graphs. I'm going to go under graphs, legacy dialogues, because remember that's where we typically are going to go when we're making a graph. I'm going to hit bar, simple as fine, that's our default. So I'm going to click define. And the first thing I'm going to do here is actually I want to be graphing the means, not just the frequency here, because I'm really more concerned about the means and how those differ between my groups. So I'm going to select other statistic, e.g. mean. And then for the category axis, I want to select my independent variable here, which is going to be point of view. And then for variable here, I'm going to select timing. That's my dependent variable, one that I'm measuring. And as you can see, that's going to be getting the mean of that timing variable. I can check what's under options here. Nothing interesting that I want right now, so I'm going to hit cancel there. And again, we have our dependent variable in the variable section, independent variable in category access, and I'll click OK. And here we can see, first of all, that SPSS is using those labels, and so I don't have to remember those codes. This is my second person bar, and this is my third person bar, and I can see the difference between those two. So now let's go ahead and do our independent t-test. I can already see here that second person is higher than third person. These are mean timings, and because these are timings, and there's more, there's a greater time here essentially. So second person is a bit slower than third person. I don't know if this is going to be statistically significant or not. It looks like there's a decent difference, but let's find out. So we're going to analyze, compare means. And this time we're going to select the independent samples t-test. And so this is going to be particularly in a situation where some of our participants have seen or experienced one level of our independent variable, and other of our participants have seen or experienced the other level, but no one person is in both groups. So in this case, people either experienced, and in this case, read the second person text versus the third person text. And so here, again, compare mean, analyze, compare means, independent samples t-test. And so here for the grouping variable, that's going to be what's defining my groups, what variable is that related to, and here that's going to be point of view. I can see I have to click define groups here. I have some question marks. And so it's going to ask me, what am I comparing here? And here I'm comparing group 2 to group 3. What are those codes in that particular column? And then my dependent variable, so that's our independent variable. Our dependent variable is going to go in test variables. And again, it doesn't hurt ever to poke around, see what's in here. I can click on options if I don't remember. Nothing for me to really do here, so I'm going to cancel out of that. That's just fine for us. And again, we have our independent variable here. We've defined our groups, and then our dependent variable on the top. I'm going to click OK. And so you can see that we get quite a bit of information here, particularly what's a little interesting and different about this is the Levine's test for equality of variances. I'm really just going to ignore that for right now. Basically, it's giving us two different t-test values for whether it assumes our groups have equal variance or not. And so this is going to help tell us whether that's the case or not. But we're really going to just ignore that for right now. But it's okay in this case to just go ahead and use the top row. And so right now we have a t-value of 2.703 or 2.70 once we round that. We have our degrees of freedom here. Again, the degrees of freedom are a little bit different than they were for our dependent t-test. And we also have our significance level. And we can see that our p-value is 0.022. And so this is going to be significant if we're using that 0.05 level, which we typically will be. So let's go ahead and write up our results here. And so to do this, I can say something like, who read the second person view. Again, we can remember here, what's bigger, what's smaller, go up to my means here. Second person, again, was slower, just as we saw up here. So it's group who read in the second person point of view. Give out those descriptive statistics here. So second person point of view was 3.92 and standard deviation of 0.13. So the group that did that slower, who read in the third person point of view, the means and standard deviation. So third person, I have 3.31, SD equals 0.18. Now I want to make sure to give information about our t-score, our p-value, whether or not this is statistically significant. And we know here that it is. So I can say this difference was and I'm going to give my degrees of freedom here, which is 10 equals, and we have our t-scores, it's 2.70, and our p-value equals 0.02, I can say. And so here I have my inferential statistics. I have some descriptive statistics for those two levels of that variable as well. And I've written up this nice couple of sentences to give my results.